Hello and welcome to Audio Suplex Live, brought to you by the Nerd Complex Podcast Network. Episode 4.
This is a clever little drop there.
Yeah, I figured, suspense. Keep the fans at home in suspense.
Keep them on the edge of their seats. Put the butts in the seats.
On the edges of the seats. Keep the butts on the edges
somewhere
of the
near.
seats.
Episode 4.
Episode 4, we made it.
We finally did it.
We're big. We're hot names. Household names.
Household names.
I found it.
None of us are homeowners with the exception of our producer, Joe. So
Someday.
one day, man. I don't know.
We'll make it.
So what do we got going on this week, Corey?
We are going to change it up this week. We're going to do something different. And if you at home like this, we'll do it more often. But instead of doing the normal recap like we do every week, this week we're just going to do a roundtable discussion. We got Shawn is here. He was on the Elimination Chamber show. So he'll be here on most pay-per-view shows. We were able to get him for a Thursday show. So this week
maybe one day once if I can get the work schedule to work out.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I really enjoyed that episode, the Elimination Chamber episode.
Fantastic. Good episode.
So we're glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
And we're going to do a roundtable discussion. I feel like we're all pretty knowledgeable in wrestling, at least somewhat. We pretend to be, so that's good enough for this. But we're going to go over some. We went over
kind of like brainstorm some questions and some
things we want to discuss.
We want to topic out. Yeah. So
I'm excited.
Yeah. So Corey,
what do you want to start out with, Travis? How do you want to start off this podcast, our debut roundtable podcast?
So I figured we would kind of start at the infancy of all of our wrestling fanhoods. And wrestling to me is really kind of built off of these little beats or these moments that you kind of stick with you and you remember throughout your fanhood. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you guys, and I'll weigh in as well, what are some moments that you guys have from your wrestling fanhood that really kind of just stick out to you? Those blips of brightness or even necessarily darkness, just things that like stand out that kind of like stick with you through wrestling.
I mean, one of them, and I'm sure this is for everybody not in the room, not just me, the Hulk Hogan heel turn.
Oh yeah.
That's because it's just of everything that Hulk Hogan was and
so long.
For so long.
His whole
career.
Was
the ultimate good guy. He was
take your vitamins, say your prayers, do your taxes.
I mean,
is that one of them?
Hustle, loyalty. Oh wait, wrong.
He had a whole list of things that were important.
Yeah, he would kind of promo about what he wanted you to do, and it would go on like 36 minutes. Just do your taxes, do your homework, hustle, loyalty, respect. I'm the best there is, the best there was, the best there will be.
I like that. That's a good pick.
We've beaten this joke into the ground.
But I mean, when he turned, I mean, I can still to this day, if I watch it, I can word for word go over to the commentary just because it's a moment that.
Yeah, Bobby Heenan was on the commentary desk for that. Obviously the WCW team used to be Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay,
Dusty Rhodes,
the American Dream. But I think Bobby Heenan had one of the best calls in that because he was the first person. He goes,
whose side is he on?
Whose side is he on? And then once with the big reveal, he's the third man.
Yeah,
it was a huge moment.
I'm getting chills thinking.
Yeah, just thinking about it.
Holy cow,
Corey, what do you got?
I'm gonna go with the first moment in wrestling I really even saw. The first match I remember seeing as a kid, and actually paying attention to me like, holy cow, what's going on, was WrestleMania Shawn Michaels versus Stone Cold with Mike Tyson as the ring enforcer. That was the first match I remember watching as a kid, and ever since I saw that, I have been watching wrestling. I took some time off in the late 2000s, but overall, that's where I started. That match, I still like going back and watching that match. Beautiful match, great finish that you didn't necessarily see coming.
Oh, and that was huge for a number of reasons because that was kind of like a passing of the torch moment from Michaels to Austin to kind of really cement Austin as the guy for this upcoming Attitude Era.
Mm-hmm.
And then also it was like a big mainstream main event because you had, one of the biggest names in boxing at the time, a crossover star in Mike Tyson, stepping into Vinnie Mac's, crazy muscle world.
Well, and unfortunately for a little bit, at least at the time, it looked like it was the end of Shawn Michaels' career too because
he was gone
he left right after that for
years.
for a couple of years
Till 2002.
Yeah.
There's a funny story about that, actually. Apparently, Michaels, being the backstage diva that he is, or was known to be, there's a persistent rumor and story that he apparently didn't want to put Austin over on that show, and that Undertaker had to physically convince him to.
I've heard a
do
couple
this
stories of there's another one too. If you not to get off the point too far, but if you go look it up, there's a DVD, the Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that, go and watch that about the match made in hell with him and Hogan and against Slaughter and his two. He didn't want to do the match. He wanted more money. Hogan and
he does that.
Hogan and I think the Undertaker and Vince had to take the Warrior in the back room, and they're like, hey, you know.
I love these stories of Undertaker being essentially like Vince's lapdog for like when things in the locker room kind of get out of hand.
He's like the judge, right?
Yeah.
He's
earned that respect over the years. I mean,
when you've been wrestling for that long.
Right. And speaking of guys who've been wrestling for a long time, we kind of established earlier on, I'm a big WCW guy. I was a huge WCW guy back in the day. But right around like 1999, I started to kind of cross over and watch some of the more WWE, or at the time WWF products.
They hooked you.
And one of the big things that hooked me, and one of my favorite wrestling moments, when people ask me like, what is it about pro wrestling that gets you? The debut of Chris Jericho on Monday Night Raw.
Beautiful.
Oh, I mean, I don't think there's been a
remember.
bigger
Debut since, or Styles at Rumble
Styles at the Rumble
was big,
months of build-up, though. You had a countdown
yeah.
clock. You had no idea. It was the countdown to the new millennium, even though it ended before the new millennium. So they're like, what is this countdown clock?
And I've always been a huge, even in his WCW days, the man of
Lionheart.
1,004 holds, the Lionheart, Chris Jericho.
The man of 1,004 holds is still one of the
best promos of all time.
I think in this current run that Jericho's been on, I think this has been his best run since
Yeah.
then.
Since then.
Well,
and that's saying a lot, because he's had a lot of really good runs.
He has.
The first undisputed heavyweight champion.
Really? I've never heard that fact.
Yeah.
Huh.
He
should
beat
probably...
Stone Cold and The Rock.
In how many nights?
All in one night.
What?
Both men.
Unreal.
Yeah, he didn't have any help.
Yeah, but like still to this day, you could put on that countdown clock, the Rock promo beforehand, talking about the Big Show checking his ass into the SmackDown hotel and this and the other thing, and then once that countdown clock hits, and I think the real moment for me where my hairs stand up on my arm is when you hear that drum beat at the beginning, the pyro goes off, and then the music kicks in, and then the name Jericho pops up.
I mean, if you go back and you watch that, just the ovation
the
that
crowd
got as
pop
soon
was
crazy,
insane.
Which at that time you didn't have the internet, so the fact that he got that big of a pop. I mean, you probably had a lot of crossover fans, WCW and WWF fans, but those WWF fans that didn't even necessarily know who he was, they apparently did know who he was, which was great. So those are all really good moments.
Yeah.
Any other matches or?
Off the top of my head, Starrcade 1997. Not necessarily the match, because the main event ended up being complete garbage anyway.
Yeah.
Once again, some more politicking from Hulk Hogan and what have you. But...
And that was one of the things where, like, when I was younger, because I was a teenager right around the time that was going on. At that time, it's like, oh, cool. And, going back and watching it now as an adult and knowing the ins and outs a little bit more, now it's just kind of like, wow, this match was complete crap. Why didn't I?
Yeah.
It's weird looking back on matches from so long ago.
I'm going to age myself a little bit. I was 11 years old in 1997 when Starrcade 97 took place. And I remember being mesmerized, because this was when Sting started his, like, crow persona.
Yeah.
The black and white face paint hanging in the rafters. Spent an entire year building this match, stalking down Hulk Hogan, pointing down the bat, taking out the NWO members. Fantastic. You couldn't build a main event match for your biggest show any better.
And they biffed it.
And then they whiffed the match.
And then you add in Bret Hart into the mix, and it
was rough.
The rumor is that Hogan told the ref, "Don't do a slow count."
Yep. Because apparently they were trying to recreate some of that heat from the Montreal Screwjob, which had just happened, a couple months previous or a month previous or whatever it was.
Yeah, because Bret couldn't wrestle under contract, so he was a special enforcer for that match.
Yep.
Because that was the only thing he could do. Yeah, I remember that.
One of my favorite matches, because it was one of the first matches one of the first pay-per-views I saw getting into wrestling, because WrestleMania 1 was the first one, because my mom being a librarian, they'd get the wrestling
VHS
videotapes.
tapes, yeah.
So WrestleMania 1 was the first one we took out, and ever after that we were all body slamming each other, which my mom absolutely loved. But the next pay-per-view after that that we took out on VHS was WrestleMania 6. Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Just stuck with
Huge hype.
still to this day stuck to me. And another just moment that like I remember, and I was always a big fan of the Rockers growing up. So Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, I always remember Shawn Michaels kicking Marty Jannetty in the face on the barbershop.
Yeah, right through the window there.
And I was a fan of his ever since. And I'll admit, I'm very comfortable to admit that during his retirement speech, when he said, for one last time, HBK has left the building, I cried. I'll admit to that.
Yeah.
I was always a big Shawn Michaels fan, for sure.
Yeah.
Exciting. Well, I don't really have anything
There's
that
so
wouldn't.
many,
I mean, the Undertaker versus Mankind in the Hell in a Cell match. Huge.
That's
What can we say that hasn't been said? I mean, there's a lot of matches out there. Let's move on to our next subject.
So Shawn,
What do you got? What do you,
we were talking about
Shawn Michaels. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer. And
Yeah.
There's a lot of Hall of Famers that we have discussed so far. What about future Hall of Famers? I mean, who do you think is a future Hall of Famer? Who do you think
active wrestlers on the roster now? Well, not even necessarily wrestlers.
Well, I've got two. I think I'm gonna.
Are we going overly obvious here?
I think
or
why don't we give two each? Because I want to do like
just
kind
do
of
two.
like a dark horse, and then obviously like somebody who is like a shoe-in.
Okay.
And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Chris Jericho was a shoe-in for the Hall of Fame.
Shoe-in.
You know,
Yeah.
the resume writes itself. He's going to go down as one of the greatest of all time.
He probably won't even have to wait that long.
No, it'll probably be the year of his retirement,
Yeah.
if not like immediately after.
Good pick.
Yeah, as kind of like a dark horse, it's kind of hard to say because the criteria is kind of muddled on like
It doesn't
what
have to
It
be
is.
that
They
dark.
really haven't
You know,
specified what is criteria for you to get.
Well,
in the
and
Hall of Fame.
I'll give you an example, and not to take away from anybody that is in the Hall of Fame because they're all deserving, but the fact that you have like a Rikishi in before you have a British Bulldog,
Right.
You know, so the criteria is kind of weird because like you could say the Miz would be a dark horse, but then some would argue that the Miz would be a shoe-in.
He's
because
won
of
the
his-
world
yeah,
title
won
and
the
the
title, he's
IC
had a
title.
long run with the company.
Main event at WrestleMania.
Yeah,
He's done a lot.
The Bellas, I think, would be
Okay.
kind of like it's kind of inevitable, but I think that people really don't think about the Hall of Fame when they think of them, but they have. They've kind of came out of the ruthless aggression era and then transitioned us into the new era that we're in now.
And they've also helped with the network and the Total Bellas and all that
yeah.
stuff that they're branching out away from wrestling.
and they've
Well,
been,
yeah,
they've
because in the
been a good
last
face
2
for that.
years, they've actually finally got their shot to be wrestlers. Because I mean, for the longest time, they tried to wrestle, then they reduced them to nothing more than arm candy for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Raw
yeah.
gets general manager
Yeah.
to finally they were taken seriously as competitors.
Well, I remember when they debuted, one would hide under the ring and they would
Do the Bella
do
swap.
the
Yeah,
swap,
yep,
and you'd
yep,
be
yep.
like, "Oh, there's two of them."
And then they actually wasted so many tissues doing that they had got to like cease and
Well,
desist
because
from,
one
like-
decided to get enhanced, so they
Yeah.
couldn't really do
Oh crap!
Bella Magic.
Right. But yeah,
Interesting.
I think the Bellas would be, one that I think not necessarily an underdog, but like people don't initially think of when you think the Hall of Fame. So
All right, I got two. I'm gonna go with my favorite wrestler of all time. He's probably pretty obvious, but Kane. Kane, I think, is a shoe-in.
walk-in Hall of Fame.
He has been active on the roster for longer than pretty
I
much
think,
anybody
and
else.
I don't think we're gonna see it because he's not having too many good years left. But I always wanted to see Undertaker's final WrestleMania match. I always felt like it was only fitting that it was him and Kane,
That would be good.
just because I feel like those two have been so
That could be both of their
synonymous.
retirement match.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've
Brothers of
both
Destruction.
been so synonymous with each
Yeah.
other. I always felt like it was only fitting that those two should be.
When
the
they were
last-
together, they
yeah.
were unstoppable as a force. So he's always been my favorite since I was a kid when he debuted. Like, oh my God, who's
And
this
he
guy?
had a huge impact on anybody who watched during that because he looked cool.
Yeah.
He moved fast for a big guy. Like
He still moves pretty fast for
Yeah.
an old big guy.
and
Like,
he
he's
was
still there.
a viable threat whenever it's surprising he doesn't have more world title reigns than he does. Like
He has appeared in more Money in the Bank ladder matches than anybody else. He,
he's
I
also-
believe, is the most Elimination Chambers.
And he's also known as, even though I think a lot of his records from the Royal Rumbles have been like wiped clean, he's one of the best Rumble competitors of all time.
He up until Roman Reigns 2 years ago, he
Had the
most eliminations.
He may have the most eliminations total still.
I think you are right about that.
And nobody's really that close, if I recall. While you're looking that up, my second one, not really a dark horse, but maybe not necessarily you think of because he's not a wrestler. Paul Heyman would be my.
I think Heyman's one of the most brilliant men.
I think he'll be in, and they'll have a ton to say about him. He's been in the rest. I mean, he's kind of changed the way wrestling was done. He with ECW changed what WWF did and kind of morphed them into doing the Attitude Era, so they can kind of compete with that.
He kind of made it okay to bring that edgier style of wrestling presentation. Real quick, I'm going to give you guys the correct answer for the number of
most eliminations.
Eliminations was Kane. Do you guys want to guess how many he has total throughout his career?
45.
50.
42.
Ooh.
Do you guys want to guess who number 2 and number 3 are?
Triple H is one of them. No.
Well, what else you got? Who else?
Triple H and Chris Jericho. No.
I'm going to go Cena.
Number
Triple
2
H
is
and Roman?
Shawn Michaels with 39.
Oh, he's been in a lot.
And
Holy
Stone
cow.
Cold Steve Austin with 36.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah.
I just know Triple H has been in a lot of Royal Rumbles.
Now, before I make my 2 picks, let me open this up to you guys because I want to, and I'll explain why I asked this. Do you believe Daniel Bryan should be
Absolutely
a Hall of Famer?
He will.
Absolutely. And because one of the big cornerstones of that argument is the fact that WWE is getting a lot better at acknowledging people's outside of WWE contributions to the wrestling industry.
Yeah.
Like inducting like at Stan Hansen, or even this year with the Rock Yeah. A lot of their career wasn't spent in WWE.
Yeah, it wasn't.
So
They usually do at least one of those people.
yeah, and I think Dan Bryan kind of bridges that gap between had a really good career outside of WWE beforehand and did a lot for wrestling, but also I don't think anybody was bigger than Daniel Bryan than like when he was in the company. Like he was like the top of everything, and he got himself over. So yeah, I think he's a shoo-in.
Obviously we're going the obvious choice in dark horse. So
You don't have to.
So I'll actually I'm gonna go 2 with the obvious.
Okay.
John Cena obviously is going to be a Hall of Famer. That's pretty much solidified. And The Undertaker, whenever he finally decides to
hang up his hat.
Finally, I think that the night before, though, they will induct him to the Hall of Fame. As far as dark horses go, man, I'm trying to think.
You don't. It's hard to say dark horse because it could be a young superstar that maybe hasn't had the years.
I'll throw one in. Zack Ryder.
You think he'll be in the Hall of Fame?
I think he's going to have himself probably at least one more major push before it's all said and done that would probably cement it. But he's done a lot for the company and has done a lot for putting himself in that position to kind of be like, if not a Hall of Fame career, then at least he's going to be one of those guys that you see kind of like transition to like a backstage role, like a producer. Or
yeah.
I'm going to go dark horse only because he just suffered his second major injury in the last year. I'm going to go Seth Rollins.
I think he'll make it.
I think he's in
still
most
young,
cases,
too.
He is. In most cases, I think he will. But you have 2 major injuries that he's had. The problem is those are kind of severe that those are the kind of injuries that can reoccur as we,
Well, yeah, the more you injure your knee.
Yeah. So I only say dark horse at this point because is this injury going to send him back that far?
Right.
Is he going to, your second major injury in less than a year, how's he going to bounce back from it? That's why I would say he'd be my dark horse just because
who knows?
You don't know how he's going to respond to this injury.
Right.
I like that. Let's move on to the next topic. You think we've covered? Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah.
My question, and this is going to be kind of an open table discussion, and we can kind of all agree maybe on what we think. It's going to be about the prestige of the belts, single belts in WWE. So we'll take into consideration SmackDown's world title, the Universal title on Raw, the U.S. title, the Intercontinental title, the Cruiserweight title, and we'll also throw in the NXT title in there as well. So 6 belts. What do you think of that list is the most prestigious belt on that list? We'll go to Shawn first. What do you think?
I got to say the WCW world title. I mean,
WWE.
WWE SmackDown title,
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
just it started on
The lineage,
WCW.
Well,
And
see, that's the thing. I'm pretty sure
That's the big belt.
the WWE title that they currently have carries the lineage of the WWE title since the Bruno Sammartino days.
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
It's kind of muddled where the world title gets its lineage from, because I think it does absorb some of the world heavyweight title.
I think that's still separate.
Yeah, the WCW title ended when it was unified with Chris Jericho. He was the undisputed champion.
And then they brought it back when Bischoff.
Yeah, they resurrected
Or no.
they resurrected the belt design when Bischoff took over as
That's
GM on
right,
Raw.
that's right.
But they didn't give it the lineage of the WCW title.
Okay.
So the WCW title ended with essentially Chris Jericho, if my knowledge serves me right.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that we're talking about now basically just carries like the prestige of like the WWE title.
The one
It's just
Shawn
hard for me to
Michaels.
say right now that the Universal title is that prestigious, just because it's only
That's why I posed the question.
and
it's
I
only
think
you're only two people in, so
and I think we agree across the board that
I
the
think it could
WWE
be-
title is the top belt in the company.
And it doesn't necessarily so prestige, you can take into account the history of the belt, but you also got to take into account how they're booking the belt in the company currently, because some of these belts have had ups and downs,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's times when the US title wasn't defended for months when Dean Ambrose held it with the Shield. He never defended the belt.
And I think the U.S. and the Intercontinental title, I mean, I think there's really no clear cut. You can either go.
I think right now the Intercontinental title would be more prestigious than the US title, just because they haven't really done anything with
I
the
think
US
that's without
title.
a question. And that's even with the caveat of saying that the Intercontinental title has seen its dark days.
It has, yeah.
Especially
I think
when
the
they,
Intercontinental's had the most ups and downs out
Yeah.
of any title.
But I think the Intercontinental title holds a certain level of prestige because of some of the classic matches that have been utilized to defend and or to
Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels.
exactly Steamboat and Savage.
Yeah.
That's you can't even talk about the IC belt without talking about that match. And then even still, like you look at the guys who are holding it now, you're talking about your like true upper mid card workhorses, and then not to mention
Former world champions.
Not to mention the IC belt has always been a stepping stone to the main event picture. So like, your guys who hold the IC belt now are going to be that next crop of WWE world champion
Hopefully.
hopefuls. So
Well, and in the last couple of years since when they put the world title on Lesnar, they really tried to, step up the U.S. title so that way it looked more
When
prestigious.
Cena had it, I think Cena's done a lot for the U.S. title over the years when he had the spinner belt. When he debuted that.
And if we were talking about the WCW iteration of the U.S. title, I think especially around the era of like 1998, 1999, it had some prestige to it because they used to have a thing where that was like the IC belt for
Their number two.
And I can't remember if it was an actual rule for the belt or not, but typically whoever had the U.S. belt became your number one contender.
Pretty much, I think, on and off.
Yeah. So if you
pretty standard
were
practice.
arguing then, my main concern with this whole question and this whole topic though is that you have the Universal title and now it doesn't have the prestige that
Time wise.
that your other belts have.
Well, booking as well.
Kind of got off to a rocky start with your first champion got injured the night that
During
he
the
won it,
match,
during the
yeah.
match, and then your second champion has defended it in less than convincing ways.
Every match has not been a clean
I think
finish.
they have a struggle ahead of them elevating that belt to where that should be the number 2 belt, or it should be even
They
more
should
ideally.
attempt to be number 1 belt on Raw.
Yeah, even more. It should be at least parallel with the
Ideally.
the WWE belt. So
So
the fact that it's now, I think maybe the 3rd or 4th on my chart.
Can we just agree that the SmackDown World title is probably at this point in time
Number
the
one.
most prestigious
Yeah.
currently
Yeah.
in WWE active
Yeah.
belts?
I
Okay.
would say that's the number 1 title.
Number 2, I would say Intercontinental probably
And
be
I would
number
agree.
2, and that's also a SmackDown belt.
I
As
would
far
agree.
as how the belt has been booked, who has held the belt in the last couple
And then
of months,
the lineage.
obviously the lineage you can take into account. I think IC'd be number 2 currently. Do you guys agree with that?
I would
agree with
agree
that.
currently.
And
Number 3, I have Universal number 3 personally.
here's where we're gonna differ on that. I think
I have Cruiserweight number 4.
in the short period of time.
Oh, I forgot about NXT in here too.
And that's the thing. In the short period of time that the NXT title has been a thing, you've had a lot of future world champions hold that belt. In Seth Rollins, you've had Finn Balor, you've had Kevin Owens,
Bo Dallas, Biggie Langston.
there's been a couple. Big E's done well for himself, obviously. Some
him
of
a
your
while.
NXT champions have not done so well in the main roster. Neville, Bo Dallas would be one of them. But for the most part, I think that, and especially now in the last couple of years where you've had like your Samoa Joes, your Shinsuke Nakamura's, your currently Bobby Roode.
I will say about the NXT belt, the booking the last couple months has not been very strong. Switching it back and forth between Jones
I don't think-
and
I
Nakamura.
I disagree.
It's changed hands like 4 times in the last 3 months.
But it's changed hands in an actual feasible way. It's not like, I don't think it's changed hands. I know people complained a lot about the women's Raw belt,
yeah.
hot potatoing back and forth, and that I think helped to maybe lower that belt's ranking and prestige a little bit. But I think the way, because you have Samoa Joe and Shinsuke Nakamura are the 2 big names of your brand. It's not unfeasible for them to trade wins back and forth.
Yeah.
And it was done in unpredictable ways too. Like it was lost on a house show.
Yeah.
And it's
Japan.
also just hard right now because there's not a lot of talent still that they feel comfortable enough holding the NXT title past Bobby Roode, past Nakamura, past
and now that
Samoa
Joe's
So-
gone, Nakamura's injured, you got Rude. Who's in contention now?
Yeah,
Your
I mean,
prestige
it's
of that
like-
belt's going to have to go down as soon as we get the next challenge.
That's another thing that's happening right now in NXT is there are injuries. Like Austin Aries was having a solid, NXT mid card run, but he's hurt.
You see, I beg to differ. I think the NXT card's going to be all right because you have a next crop of main event NXT guys.
See, I don't-
coming
but we're
up.
at the beginning of the building stages on all those.
I think
And
we're
look,
a little further
I don't think
along
the
than you
main-
think. I think you could put a as much as we want to see him on the main roster, you could throw a Ty Dillinger in the title picture, and that helps out a lot.
It does.
You could throw a Eric Young in the title picture, and I
Yeah.
think that would help out a lot.
As a heel,
Yeah, you have another crop of guys that I think we are in the building stage with, like your Roderick Strongs and not to mention we have Hideo Itami who is ready to come back at.
And I love that we're talking about these guys, that they're up and comers. These are all well known, have wrestled for
And look,
many
the
years.
NXT men division didn't suffer as much as the women's division did.
Yeah.
And because right now it's like, it's Asuka and
She's got to go, otherwise nothing's
it's
realistic.
Asuka and then who's maybe
Billy Kay,
Ember
Moon, Nikki Cross.
I'll give you my list in this order.
Okay,
I
number 1.
would go World,
Okay,
Intercontinental,
gotcha.
NXT.
See, I have Universal, then NXT.
Then I would go Universal.
Okay,
Then I would go Cruiserweight, and then US.
US is the lowest, I think.
US is, I think, consensus would be the lowest ranked title.
I would go World, IC, NXT, US, Universal, and Cruiserweight. Just because, I like the Cruiserweight division.
Yeah.
I get into it. 205 Live, and that might be a little bit of an overkill.
I guess.
But I like the Cruiserweight.
I think the
division,
matches that
but
they
I
have
don't
done
think,
have been
I think
better
in the
than
grand
the
scheme of
US.
things, not a lot of people care about the Cruiserweight division or the Cruiserweight title in general.
Well, the thing is, and this is another discussion for another day, but like they haven't really done much to separate. When you had the Cruiserweight Classic, they had matches that separated it from the main roster stuff that you would see all the time. Now the movesets that they're letting these guys use on Raw and on 205 Live isn't really enhancing the matches
Right.
because you can watch a Kevin Owens match if you want to see a moonsault. You can watch a Seth Rollins match if you want to see a suicide dive or a plancha. Like
I know I mentioned this on an episode a couple weeks ago about if they could bring in someone like a Rey Mysterio or a big name cruiserweight to kind of make people want to watch 205. Like, oh, Rey Mysterio's on 205
And I think
Live?
that would help a lot.
And it doesn't have
And
to be
if the
anyone
rumor's
big,
true
but-
that he keeps teasing it, and I hope just because maybe I will be the only one that would get it, but Austin Aries would add to that.
Yeah, I think he would.
And I
Still,
like
though-
the Cruiserweight title just because it gives Neville something to do again. I mean,
Something
when's the
relevant.
last time you've been this interested in Neville? I mean, the
NXT.
heel turn was phenomenal, and it gives him something where he's not going to be dropped into obscurity for
Exactly. He's been wasted for far too long.
Okay, so Corey, what's your final list?
World title number 1, Intercontinental title number 2, 3. I have the Universal. 4, I have the NXT, 5 cruiserweight, and 6 U.S. title.
Okay. So general consensus is that we all agree
The top we all agreed on.
it's that middle
The
part
middle
that
you
gets
can
kinda-
shuffle up any way you want
Yeah.
anyways. It's kind of your own taste on.
We'll see.
what
I would
you wanna
like
see.
to see, just to kind of like punctuate this conversation, what belt would you like to see raise up in prestige?
Cruiserweight would be great.
Yeah.
Universal.
Yeah, either Universal or the U.S. title even.
I was gonna say
I think right now the fact that Jericho has it and what he's doing with Kevin Owens, I think it helps the belt.
I also think that belt could use a redesign as well. I think that would maybe help out a little bit. But I think if they utilize the U.S. belt on Raw as that real true blue, because they have a good mid card on
Defend
on
the
Raw.
title.
Have the title defenses on Raw. Get the belt on some of your guys like your Sami Zayns. Get your belt on. Put it on Big E for a little bit. He's incredibly over, and the New Day's not really doing anything with the tag titles immediately. It's not going to hurt them to have one of the guys have a.
It was one
title.
of those things where once they lost the tag team titles, it's just kind of like
They've
what
kind
now?
of they don't need the title belts anymore. They're kind of above that at this point.
So piggybacking off of that conversation with the belts and where we would like kind of see them go, we're coming up on WrestleMania here, a couple weeks. I want to get your guys' idea of who do you think is going to have the biggest breakout year post this coming WrestleMania and before next WrestleMania.
So based pretty much what happens at WrestleMania on.
So who could we see going from like the pre-show of 33 to going to the mid card to main event of 34?
Does it have to be a mid card?
Not necessarily, like
I think Zayn will probably finally have.
I think Zayn, this is his year.
2017 is going to be the breakout year for
And
Sami.
I'd really, because he's got all the tools there, and I kind of want to see like a Paul Heyman type be paired with him, because I think that will elevate him even more. I think Braun Strowman's due for a big year. I think we could see him even potentially win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal this year.
See, I almost feel
I can see that happening, but I think he's pretty much as high as he's going to get. I mean,
well, no, I still think there's a high.
do you think
ceiling
he's going to
for
be
him.
the most? From Mania to Mania, I think he'll make the biggest improvement.
No,
because he's already at the top of the card.
Braun Strowman, yeah, he's kind of in a weird position. I feel like the time to have him win the Andre the Giant would have been last year or the year before, even. He's kind of past that point now. Like I think Baron Corbin was the right choice to win it this past year because he's taken that momentum
finally
and ran with it. And I would even say he would be my candidate for this topic, but I think he's already going to have a great year this year.
Yeah, I think I think Baron Corbin would be a good pick for this.
Yeah, see, I disagree because I think he's already in line for that. Like I want
But
to
he's
say,
not in the world title. This is his first.
I'm going to throw this one out here. I think Kofi Kingston is going to have a pretty solid run at like singles competition possibly this coming year. Not that I think the New Day is going to break up,
I
but
think he's already done that.
I think they kind of need to, though.
But I think he could be in that conversation of guys that maybe takes like the U.S. title or something to that effect and then elevates it up to a higher level and kind of makes it more of a prestigious belt. I'm just, once again, this is all hypothetical.
Yeah.
But, I think he's one of those guys that could kind of go from like a member of an incredibly over tag team, but I think he can go to even more incredibly over and maybe even get into that universal title picture as well.
Really?
I think so.
I think Big E would make a better choice for the world title.
See, I think on paper, yes, but I think
Kofi's had his chance. He's been around for a long time.
But I think
10
now
years.
that Kofi's take that career that he's had, and now that he's had a chance to be in the spotlight and be over, I think now would be the time to pull the trigger on that. Have him win. Have him be a surprise. Okay, so remember when SmackDown
Money
Live,
in the Bank?
Money in the Bank would be good, or even like if a 6-pack challenge, how like SmackDown Live opened up, and everybody was shocked when Dolph Ziggler immediately became the number one contender for the WWE title.
Right.
It was huge, and I think something like that could definitely be something that could elevate Kofi Kingston to that next level. Like,
Would it be believable?
I think so.
You could see him beating 5 other top guys.
Depends on how he's booked. If you book him as that plucky underdog, where he's just kind of like,
I see Zayn fitting that mold better.
You have a couple guys,
than Kofi.
Yeah, you have a couple guys on Raw that I think could kind of fit that mold, but just a suggestion.
So let's all have a finalized pick, and then a year from now, when we're still doing this podcast, we'll say
Wow,
decide.
Travis, you were right. Kofi
Travis, how did
Kingston,
you know Kofi would be the
For-
longest reigning Universal Champion of all time?
Insane, yeah. And then to think that he held the tag titles and the U.S. title at the same
At
time.
the same time.
Unreal.
Are you going to go with Kofi?
You know what? I'm all in.
Coach.
Kofi, let's go.
I'm going to go Baron Corbin.
I'm going to go Sami Zayn.
Those are three good choices. I
Yeah.
like all three of those.
We'll see.
Yeah. So,
Who's
Shawn.
going to win the world title?
So, potentially we got Goldberg facing off against Kevin Owens coming up here at Fastlane in a couple weeks. And if you believe the rumors, it's going to end up being Goldberg and Lesnar for the world title.
You would be a very
Universal
unwise
title.
man to bet against Goldberg in this
Yeah.
match, is what I think.
So, my question is, we have a potential going into WrestleMania where we're going to have a part-timer as a world champion again.
Correct.
Are part-timers good for the business?
I think yes, especially this time of year, pre-WrestleMania. So once the beginning of the year rolls around, you get the Royal Rumble, you get WrestleMania. I think part-timers are great. It gets the casual viewer to say, "Oh, so-and-so's back," or a name that you wouldn't necessarily see. It gets those people to view that wouldn't normally view Raw or SmackDown, or maybe even tune into a pay-per-view.
I think at this level of our fandom, sometimes as a wrestling fan, you kind of have to remove yourself and kind of look at the business from different angles. I think initially one of your, and I hate the term smart, but one of your like smarkier knee-jerk reactions would be, "Oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
You know, Kevin Owens is a workhorse.
Why aren't they pushing this guy?
Why aren't they pushing Sami Zayn? Why aren't they pushing this? Why aren't they?" But then I think you have to kind of remove yourself from that and look at the business from the angle of wrestling is a very nostalgia-based
For sure.
industry. You know, we spent an entire 10-15 minutes at the top of the show talking about what our favorite moments from the past were, and it's those things that kind of bring us back in every once in a while. And I think for a casual fan who tunes in at WrestleMania to tune in and see, wow, they have this new belt on Raw and Brock Lesnar, and Bill Goldberg are going at it for the belt. I don't think it's a bad idea. Like, one, it raises the awareness of the belt, which obviously raises the prestige of it if done properly.
Yeah.
And two, when you get out of WrestleMania season and your new fans are hooked in, that's your time to start pushing your workhorse guys.
Hook them on to other guys.
Put Samoa Joe over your Brock Lesnar or whoever ends up carrying the belt out of Mania. Put a Kevin Owens over him. Put a Sami Zayn over it. It's an ultimate underdog, as we were kind of saying earlier.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be had about like part-timers taking up too much of the time. I don't like how much of the Rumble was focused on these returning guys like Undertaker.
And that was one of the problems. It's like you knew you weren't going to get too many of the surprises just because they had to invest so much money in bringing in Goldberg and bringing in Brock Lesnar and bringing in the Undertaker for the Rumble.
And I do think, this Rumble is a really good, cross-section of what the product is this time of year with the returning guys, with your newer guys and stuff. I think there is an argument to be had to maybe start kind of pushing younger talent while you're doing it.
If they're doing it the right way, I think there's nothing wrong with it. If you're using the older talent, the part-time talent to put over new talent, there's no reason why you shouldn't do it.
Unfortunately, and then here's where I think a lot of the cynicism in wrestling fandom comes in, is that the history books are littered with stories of not doing it the right way and not using your older talent. Like WCW's downfall was almost cornerstoned by the idea that you had these older guys who had creative control in their contracts, didn't want to look bad on television. And
TNA, the same thing.
Yeah, TNA.
All those same guys that were in WCW went to TNA and did the same thing they did in WCW.
Nobody, and I think hindsight, you ask a lot of these guys and they go back and say like, yeah, I kind of wish I would have put over younger talent, because if that were the case in WCW, we might still be talking about WCW to this day.
Probably would have been.
I mean, we are technically still talking about
yeah, but it's the same thing with TNA. If TNA would have stick to their initial formula, which is, okay,
let's be different.
We don't have The Rock. We don't have this. We don't have that. We don't have these big names, but we do have Frankie Kazarian. We have AJ Styles. We have Samoa Joe. We have this hot up and coming crop of new stars that you can get behind. And then they flushed it down the toilet by bringing in your, Scott Steiners and your Kevin Nash
and Macho Man.
And no
Hulk
disrespect
Hogan.
to those guys in their careers, but that's not the way.
They brought all these guys in at the end of their careers.
Yeah.
Guys that shouldn't be
wasn't
wrestling
even
anymore.
past their prime. There wasn't even.
These are guys that
prime
had
left.
decided to stop wrestling, and then TNA's like, "Hey, do you want to make some money?" And they're like, "Okay, I can come back and hobble around the ring for a bit.
So it could be as much help as it is harm, I think.
You just got to do it right.
Yeah, it's got to be booked right and it's got to be done right. And I think history shows that there's potential for both ways.
I think the only good thing about the potential of Lesnar or Goldberg holding the title is then it goes back to our prestige, our title prestige.
Yeah, exactly.
That gives a chance for the U.S. title to be prestigious again. I just question if, it really looks good for the business as you have part-timers coming in, smashing your new era that you're trying to push, and if it's the best thing for the business, which, it's going to be an argument for either or. I understand that.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm excited because I do think if the rumors are true and that, we're putting the belt on Goldberg, I think it's going to help raise the title a little bit.
And that's where I think you do need a better SmackDown main event then, because if you're going in already knowing, okay, we got Lesnar Goldberg, they aren't going to go for any more than 5 minutes. So
I don't know.
We'll see, man. We got a couple weeks till Mania, so
I think putting the belt on either one of them, whoever takes the belt off of them, well, I'm going to go ahead and assume that Lesnar will be victorious at WrestleMania. Whoever takes the belt from him is going to be huge.
Yeah.
So that person's going to get a huge rub.
Here's hoping that whoever ends up being that person is the right choice person. For that. So, real quick, to cap this, who would you guys see as the person to get the rub from taking the belt off of either Lesnar or Goldberg if they should take it off of them after Mania?
Depends on where they're at. I could see, once again, like a Sami Zayn, you go back and do the Daniel Bryan underdog where there's no way he's going to win it.
Put him in like a triple threat, so it's not necessarily like an unfeasible thing, but it's like a long shot.
Could also see a Samoa Joe.
Yeah. I would like Samoa Joe.
Samoa Joe would probably be my pick as well, or like a returning Finn Balor or something like that.
Yeah, I can't really think of anybody else though.
Yeah, so
that would make sense, and
we'll see, man. Feasible. We'll see how they utilize. I do think, and once again, just it kind of depends on the part-timers too.
Yeah.
Like a Goldberg or a Brock Lesnar, those are household names. Those are names that people know.
Booker T's coming back.
If you bring back a Scott Steiner, no offense, as much as I love
Holler.
as much as
if you hear me,
as much as I love the Big Bad Booty Daddy,
he's actually a restaurant owner now.
Is he really?
Yeah, he owns a restaurant somewhere in Michigan. I don't know.
I think he's probably in Detroit. He's from Detroit.
Yeah, he went to a very highly educated university up there.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so that's cool up north. So anyway,
let's move on to our next topic here.
It's our last topic.
Our last topic here. Who do you guys think would benefit the most from a trade from one show to the other? So, for example, you can take a guy. You don't have to come up with a fair trade. You don't have to say I would trade this person from Raw from this person to SmackDown. Just who do you think would be better on the other show?
I'm immediately sending Sami Zayn back down to NXT where he'll be the NXT champion for
Forever.
the next 10 years. I'm just kidding.
I think Sammy on SmackDown would make sense.
I think I'm going to go a Raw superstar to SmackDown, but I'm going to say Cesaro to SmackDown would benefit him more.
I would have agreed with you.
He's doing real good.
He's doing real good with Sheamus, but I'm thinking long term
Surprisingly.
they're not going to have that tag team together long term. So
I think he could be a world title contender on SmackDown.
I think he's an immediate world title contender on SmackDown.
See, I disagree. I think he would actually be more realistic in the Universal title picture than I think he would be in the world title picture, and that goes back to the prestige of the belt.
I think you'll have to wait until those part-timers are out of the way.
Yeah. We'll
Goldberg
see.
and Lesnar are gone, then there's going to be more room at the top of that cart.
We'll see when the dust settles. It's going to be hard to say, from SmackDown to Raw, just because I feel like SmackDown's mid-card and upper mid-card are so kind of depleted. Like, they really don't.
Yeah, okay. Well, then don't think about how the other show would do. Just think of how the superstar would do on the other show.
We've talked about it before, taking Kalisto and putting him to Raw or putting him to wherever the rest of the
205.
cruiserweights. Yeah, exactly.
Which you could say that. If you would move Kalisto to 205 Live, that can be your trade.
Maybe even moving a tag team to SmackDown just to kind of bolster up the tag team.
A reputable.
Yeah, maybe take like the
New Age Outlaws. You didn't know?
No, I didn't.
Your ass better call somebody.
No, maybe taking like why don't we just do a 2-for-1 since Sheamus and Cesaro?
There you go.
To SmackDown. Let them kind of like be the hot new tag team on the scene, like
the club.
Yeah, I'm okay keeping them separate, especially if they continue.
Especially because they're kind of trying to purposely like keep them away from
I
each
know
other.
you're really looking forward to that inevitable.
I don't know. The Bullet Club outside of the WWE is getting so huge.
Yeah.
I feel like it's starting to turn into the NWO. I mean, you're getting it to where it's getting too big to feasibly make sense.
Right.
When everybody's in the Bullet Club, what does it really matter if you're in the Bullet Club or not? You know.
Well, since we're kind of in this topic of trades, another thing that an angle that we can look at this as well. Let's say we're doing another post WrestleMania or pre SummerSlam NXT call up or NXT draft.
Okay.
Who could you potentially? I mean, there's some obvious choices like Nakamura would be an obvious choice. The Revival, I think, would be.
Yeah.
You know, but nobody also saw Mojo Rawley coming up. Nobody saw Carmella coming up.
Right.
What are some choices from NXT that you could see coming up? To the
Almost.
roster? Okay.
CN.
Okay.
He's.
I know you're a big fan of his.
I like the way he wrestles.
He's good. He's a very solid worker.
He hasn't really had much going on in NXT, but I know he's ready to move up to the next level. You know, to be on TV. He could.
I could see an Eric Young coming up, or the whole Sanity group in
I think
general.
they will eventually.
Yeah.
I think they're just now finally getting their full-on push here in NXT, so it'll probably be at least another year before we see any of those guys coming to the main roster, in my opinion. I think they got a lot to do.
I could also see, like you said, the Revival.
I think that's pretty much, they're probably the next tag team to come up for sure.
How hard of a push do they get when they come up, do you think?
Hopefully to the moon. And
I
back.
would. The only issue with the Revival that I have, and that's just more not.
They're
really,
too good.
I'm afraid of how the main roster is going to take to that gimmick because
I think their gimmick's fine. It's not over the top or unbelievable.
yeah, but it's so weird what gets over on the main roster that doesn't get over on NXT and vice versa. I'm trying to think of how to quantify this into words.
It's just like kind of like how the Vaudevillains, they worked in a smaller scale in NXT, but didn't translate to a
So
bigger
what about
scale.
the Revival? Do you think
I almost
wouldn't
feel
translate?
like an Authors of Pain would translate more to the main roster style. And,
They feel more
and
like an
gimmickry.
Attitude Era type tag team to me.
And I think a lot of your main roster fans kind of clamor for that. Whereas I think the old school aesthetic of the Revival might get lost on a few people on the main roster.
I think on SmackDown, where they're more of a focus on the matches.
Yeah.
I think they'd be better on SmackDown.
And I agree with that. If they were to go anywhere and I could pick where they would go, I think that would be the spot.
But I think the Authors of Pain also that it will help because they have Paul Ellering, who used to manage the Legion of Doom, which people,
I think they would fit better on Raw.
immediately gives them credibility too, having Paul Ellering behind the wheel.
And they're big,
is.
big bad booty daddies. They are.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
unreal.
But
Yeah. So,
any other trades?
can you think of
Okay,
any trade that you
let's do a fantasy booking here. A top guy for a top guy. SmackDown, Raw, one of the top world title picture guys for another world title picture guy. Who do you got?
Okay. I'm going to take Kevin Owens from Raw.
And put him on SmackDown.
Put him on SmackDown.
Who are you taking from SmackDown?
Dean Ambrose.
That's good.
Because that opens up a lot of that Shield reunion that they like to tease so much. And then I think Kevin Owens, in his work style, he can kind of revert back to that prize
I'd like
fighter
to see him
gimmick.
wrestle AJ Styles more.
Yeah, and I think you have a lot of matches. You could Dolph Ziggler would be a good feud for him there. The Miz and Kevin Owens, fantastic feud.
Yeah.
Though just the promos alone would be enough to.
I wouldn't mind seeing, not that this is a title holder at the top, but Rusev on SmackDown.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd have something to do there.
I think he could flesh out that upper mid card finally that they're kind of
Yeah, I don't know. They're kind
devoid of.
Yeah. You got a
Probably
top guy?
wouldn't happen in a million years, but I'm gonna go Chris Jericho to SmackDown.
Okay.
Just because I feel like he would
I like him on SmackDown.
breathe some
back
life
in the day.
into SmackDown.
Yeah.
And then
Someone that's good on the mic.
move Ziggler over to Raw, just because maybe he can help some of the mid card guys,
Put that U.S. belt on him.
Put the U.S.
Put some
belt
great
on him,
matches.
and as a heel again, I think he could give some of the guys over on Raw good matches.
Oh yeah,
because he's still a great worker. He just needs to. I think they just need to find a new gimmick for him too, or just maybe
I like the
repackage
idea
him somehow.
of him being a heel. It's just a matter of finding his motivation and channel it to the right opponent.
And I think that
makes
SmackDown
sense.
doesn't have the opponents for him because
Right.
if you have him feuding against the main event opponents, then you have to put him in the title picture.
Right.
They don't want to do that, and you don't really
And
have
everybody
a
else
mid-card.
is
everybody else
either-
is Kalisto and
Everybody else is, yeah. Then you got your Baron Corbins and your Miz that are kind of grasping onto the top tier.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be up there. Ziggler doing that as well. Is just too many people trying to get at that that aren't necessarily at that level.
Right.
So, yeah.
What do you got for your 1-to-1 straight up trade?
Oh man, I would like to see. I'd like to see Kevin Owens on SmackDown, and I would give Raw. Oh wow, I would give Raw. I would say Dean Ambrose. You already said that. That's hard because I like SmackDown more than Raw.
Sorry, I took the good one there.
Dean's this. I'm not a big fan of Dean anymore. I think the Miz would be good on Raw. Let's do the
you'd be
do
good
the
on
Miz
Raw.
for Kevin Owens. I think that would be a good one.
Okay. I think the Miz, especially with the character developments that he's had this year,
Mega heel
would be a really good fit on Raw.
They could even do it storyline where Dan Bryan's like, "Fine, you've been traded to Raw.
Yeah,
We got a good deal."
the story writes itself. So
Because, I mean, we'd all like to see Daniel Bryan against The Miz. Obviously,
They tease it so much.
they are. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's a chance until I went and realized that
Probably not.
Daniel Bryan's got CTE, or at least the developmental of starts of CTE, which...
And we spent an episode talking about, or part of an episode talking about whether or not this is the biggest work in history. So
It would be crazy if it was.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, I'd actually be okay if it was, just because
I feel
I'd
like
love
the payoff,
to see it.
But
the
do you
payoff for this
think
would be
that Dan would give up 2 years of his career for a work?
that is Heath Ledger levels of dedication to your art. Like that is, especially if you're Daniel Bryan, because it's been documented time and time again how much he loves the wrestling industry. And
I don't.
if this has been the
highly
biggest
improbable.
work in history, it's once again all fantasy, but that would be super insane.
I'd be
if it
down.
was, so.
I'd be down.
Guys, I like this. I like this
is fun.
roundtable. This is fun. We should do more of these. If you guys
Yes.
listening think we should do more of these, let us know on Twitter. Let us know in the comments on this YouTube channel. Let us know on Facebook. And Corey, where can they do that all at?
Audio Suplex Live
On Twitter, Facebook,
on all of them.
and everything.
Someday
And,
Instagram, maybe. Who knows?
all right. And you can follow me personally at XDrTX on Twitter.
I'm heel_ Corey.
I am DJ Cass with a K _ Shawn.
I did want to say, if you guys have
sorry.
any questions that you want us, or things that you want us to discuss at our next roundtable, if we do this again,
Yeah.
comment those as well or tweet at us.
Yeah.
Let us know. We would love some more, maybe things that we haven't thought of that we could discuss, or anything that you're interested in. So
Our DMs are open. Mine.
Travis's DMs are open, so you can hit him up for anything personal.
All right.
But yeah, that concludes our show. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next Thursday.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we would like to thank the band Wax for our intro and outro music. You can check them out at waxoh.bandcamp.com. You have been listening to the Nerd Complex Podcast Network.